Welcome back into another episode of The Pit, Georgia's regional sports show, talking everything sports from major to college across the board, and it's a big week ahead. Of course, Drew Pavon here in WTVM in Columbus, Georgia, joined by James Irwin down in Albany, Georgia, WALB, and of course, Joseph Doring out at WRDW in Augusta, Georgia. James, your first time on the show with us. Thanks for joining in.
Absolutely, and thank you guys for having me. I'm ready to get into it.
All right, absolutely, and a lot to talk about this week. College, pros, but of course, maybe the biggest one, the Atlanta Braves getting their season started this Friday, opening day at Truist Park for the Bravos. Kansas City Royals coming into town, 7:15 p.m. Eastern is first pitch. James, expectation, we got the rotation graphic up there. Injury news came again for the Bravos. Spencer Strider is going to start the year on the IL, and outside of Chris Sale, not looking bright for that rotation this year.
Yeah, you absolutely said it. Just, as Braves fans, you should come to expect that whenever news is coming out, it's going to be an injury news. The Braves have lost, now have lost Hassan Kim until May. Sean Murphy is going to start the year on IL. Joey Wentz tore his ACL. He's out all year. Hurston Waldrop, who could have been another starting pitcher guy who we've seen take innings before, he's going to be out until midseason. Schwellenbach is going to be out until midseason. It's just who is really left for this Atlanta Braves starting pitching rotation right now. They're going to be definitely trying to find some guys. Maybe you give J.R. Ritchie a look. He gets an early call-up. We have Dieter Fuentes as that early kind of long relief role. Maybe he has to start taking some starts now. So really that Spencer Strider injury has really put the Braves in a hole, especially the starting rotation was kind of thin already going into the year with injuries. Now it just is even more thin, a week before opening day.
Yeah, it's not a great timing, especially for that, Joe. I mean, you look at that rotation graphic right there. That's definitely not what you want to see as a Braves fan.
No, not at all. I haven't followed this team for several years since I was a kid. We've seen some insane starting rotations to begin each season, and over the last couple of years, we definitely have seen this starting five kind of dwindle down as Spencer Strider's velo has gone down. Those injuries have caught up to him. We've had other injuries, as we have just mentioned with everybody else on the Braves pitching staff. But right now in this starting five, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have these five starting off the 2026 season. It may be a little bit troublesome in April and May in these early games, but it's the longest season of any professional sport for a reason. So even if these guys don't have the juice to get it going on the beginning of the season start, we can still see them play a playoff push in the late summer here.
And I like what you said. It's not a horrible five to roll into the year. Like James mentioned, there is Didier Fuentes, who made that opening day roster, who was projected to be a middle reliever, maybe give you 2 to 3 innings. We may see him get a couple starts. And, of course, the Braves always have deep prospects when it comes to pitching. I know we saw it with the Columbus Clingstones last year. They had like 5 of their top 10 prospects were all pitchers, and those guys were lights out. So the future's bright for that. But, James, you mentioned earlier, with the injuries this team has, especially 5 starters on the IL, the rotation on the IL might be better than the starting rotation they have right now. Schwellenbach, Strider, Smith-Shawver, Waldrop, and Joey Wentz, which is insane to say for a team with that many injuries that their guys hurt, maybe when their guys starters, and we're not even close to opening. We're close, but we haven't even reached opening day. But enough of the pitching talk. Let's talk hitters. I mean, Sean Murphy, he's going to be on the IL to start the year. What are you guys looking forward to 1 through 9 for this team on Friday?
Man, I'm really looking forward to a full offseason of a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. He's coming off World Baseball Classic where he won it for Venezuela. Him and Venezuela took home that championship. I'm looking forward to him getting back to speed, hitting the ground running. My prediction is Acuna wins the NL MVP again this season, coming off of his torn ACL. We've seen what a healthy Ronald Acuna Jr. can do when he's had that time to fully recover. I think he's got a full offseason to hit now. I think Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to explode this MLB season.
Joe, who you got? Who you looking forward to 1 through 9 in that lineup?
I don't know if I'm looking for anybody specific outside of Acuna, but the one thing I do want to kind of realize is the fact that after this Urix and Profar news a couple months ago, we haven't really talked about it too much, and that's because the Braves have already been through this once already just a year ago, and the headlines were, how are the Braves going to respond? How is the hitting going to make a difference when this was the biggest signing they made in free agency? And here we are now, a second-time offender of the same PED substances, and he's banned for the whole season. So how are the Braves going to just put that behind them? And I think they've already done a really good job because, as I've said, we haven't been seeing this a lot in the news as of late. So the fact that this Braves team has kind of putting that pass in there and just looking forward to the rest of the 2026 season. That's what I'm kind of focused on right now. We know that we have several guys that can step up to be great hitters. We have some guys that can step up to be great pitchers. But who is it going to be that can block out all the noise and get us down the stretch where we need to be later on in the postseason?
I think the Profar news, and I'm glad you brought it up, because, him being out for the entire year, he got suspended last year. But when he came back, he was huge for them. And, not to have that and the expectations with what people thought that outfield was going to look like, this is still one of the more talented lineups, 1 through 9 going down. And especially if you get Sean Murphy back in the middle of that year with Drake Baldwin coming off that Rookie of the Year ballot. I don't know how you can't love the Drake. The kid's outstanding, but hopefully these bats can really get going, because that was a problem last year. Was like, you look at the Rileys and the Michael Harrises who just struggled to get it started and get going. If these guys can find their footing like they did back in 23 when they were one of the best hitting teams in baseball, they can have a lot of success down the stretch. And it all is going to start Friday with the Kansas City Royals coming into Truist Park. So a lot to look forward to with that. But, I mean, the woes continue with the health of this team. Walt Weiss, first year as the manager for the Braves, not starting out the way he obviously would have hoped. But Chris Sale is the projected opening day starter. I say projected, he's already been named, but, with how the injuries fly with this team, you really don't know. All right, James, biggest expectations for this team going into this year. What do you think they need to do to turn it all around?
First off, what I think you really need to do is you got to address starting pitching at some point. Like we said, with the guys that are going to come back mid-season, you want to, but I would go out and get Lucas Giolito, one of the best free agents still on the market. Kind of hard to imagine that he didn't sign a contract considering how good he was for Boston last season. But I think you got to go out and you get Lucas Giolito, and then it really is on the lineup. The guys they have in the lineup right now, like, that is a good enough lineup when they're all performing well. We saw it in 2023, one of the best offenses ever. That is a good enough lineup to go compete with the Los Angeles Dodgers and to go win a World Series. I think you really got to nail down this starting rotation, get a little bit of bullpen pieces, but I think the lineup is kind of where you want it, especially when you do get Sean Murphy back and him and Baldwin can flip-flop between catcher and DH. I think you're I think your lineup's looking in a really good spot right now, especially with a healthy Acuna. You're hoping Austin Riley can bounce back, get to his form. But I really think you got to address the pitching. Once you get the pitching situation figured out, I think you really can start looking for, what the Braves should be at this point, is a World Series team. At least make a deep postseason push.
Yeah, Joe, this is a team that didn't have a very good start to last year. I mean, 0-7, and people always say games don't matter in April. But when you start that slow, it kind of trickled down throughout the rest of the year, because of the games in September just didn't matter for the Braves. How key is this upcoming series and just the couple weeks to follow for the Braves?
Yeah, I definitely think it's always important to get off to a good start, and that's not something the Braves have been able to do for the last couple seasons here now. But even going back to our opening discussion about the starting 5 rotation that we're going to be seeing here in the next several weeks, that is crucial that we can maybe get 2 out of 1, 2 out of 3, whatever it may end up being in a series. You got to get those series wins, because that's something the Braves could not do to start the season last year. I think they maybe went about 3-4 weeks in a row without a series win in the early stretch of the season. So that's got to be something that the Braves completely avoid this year if they want to make it to the All-Star break with some back pocket change, for say, if you want to talk about those wins that did matter, that you didn't think mattered too much in the first month or 2 of the season. But once you get to September, as you mentioned, Drew, that's a great point. Those wins start to matter a lot. And it's like, how did we lose 3 straight to the Marlins?
You never want to be losing to Miami, especially getting swept to that team. But this was a Braves team that I felt like was one of the hottest teams in September to really round out the year. And people were like, oh, they're on such a great win streak. But, they were so far out of the playoff conversation because of those early months just struggling to go on with this team. But a lot to look forward to. Baseball's back. I mean, the weather is perfect right now. I don't know how much you can ask for a better opening day. Going to be at Truist Park. Hopefully around 80 degrees would be great. Sit back, enjoy some baseball, of course. But, hey, baseball's wrapping up, but it's March. And you know what March is all about. It's madness. It's basketball. And we're talking about next. Georgia men's and women's have early exits from the big dance. More coming up on The Pit. All right, welcome back into another episode of The Pit, Georgia's sports show. And, of course, We talked Braves, but March is all about the madness, and it's all about college basketball. Georgia men's early exit from the tournament against St. Louis in a whopping 102 to, I think it was 77. I mean, they were down, it seemed like almost 50 at one point, but they were able to cut it down there at the end. Joe, I'll start with you. First round exit again for a Mike White team.
Yeah, I was at work during this one, so I didn't have time to actually get to watch any of the game during the moment, but I was keeping track of that box score, and I could not believe my eyes. Neither could I believe my bracket, because in all three that I created, I took Georgia, and I then had to go back and realize to myself, yeah, this is the overarching issue with Georgia basketball. Mike White and the Dogs cannot get over this hump of winning a first-round game. It's a kryptonite that I've seen, rarely for any other team, maybe other than Nebraska, who has just broken through that mold after a historic bad time in the NCAA tournament. But for Georgia, you got to start asking the question here, is Mike White the answer for what the Dogs need, or do they need to go in a different direction? Because at one point, Georgia was down 40 in the second half. They did a little damage control on that box score, but still looking pretty ugly up there, 102-77 final.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, St. Louis, they're a very good team, and it showed up on Thursday night, that's for sure. And they gave Michigan a little run for their money on Saturday. But James, Georgia's struggling again, another back-to-back years with first-round bounces. What's wrong with this team?
It's just kind of the toughness in these big games. Like Georgia, whenever they get into a big game, they kind of just get pushed around a little bit. And then in no disrespect to St. Louis, they were one of the more underrated teams heading into the tournament. But when the rest of the SEC looked as good as they did in the tournament, and then Georgia laid an egg. I mean, it was a stinker of a game that they just put up against St. Louis. I mean, they did not rebound well. They didn't shoot well. I mean, it was just it was not an ugly game, and I think that just comes back to like kind of the mental and physical toughness of this team. Whenever they get into a big game and get big spot, they kind of look like they just get pushed around by the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilkinson hung like a 30-piece on St. Louis. That was like the lone bright spot. If you look through the box score of that game, and you're just like, what? Like St. Louis did what? The Billikens to what SEC supposed team. So I mean, a tough stretch for Mike White's group. And Joe, you mentioned it, is Mike White going to get over this hump? Year 4 ends with another first-round exit. I feel like for Georgia, like this is a program that, has struggled over the past, decade and a half. And even when they had Anthony Edwards, that 2020 year, they wouldn't have made the dance even if they could. But this is a team that, it has the backing, it has the talent, but it just can't get over that hump. But is Mike White the guy to do that going into year 5?
Well, I think you also got to look back at the SEC tournament. I mean, the Dogs got bounced in their first game against 14-seed Ole Miss and Chris Beard and company. No one saw that coming. So do we ask the question, like, did that take the wind out of their sails going into the SEC tournament? The Dogs could have made a run. They would have ended up playing Alabama in the next round had they gone on to beat Ole Miss. But Ole Miss took down Georgia, then they took down Bama. And that was honestly a concern of mine, Drew, being a Tide fan, thinking that we might have a little bit of rust on us going into the NCAA tournament. That didn't be the case for Alabama, but it sure was the case for Georgia, because as both of y'all have just mentioned, St. Louis, not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. Did have Michigan on the ropes there for the better half of that game on Saturday night, I believe. But this was not a game that you want to see as a Dogs fan ever happen again. Maybe the worst defense I've ever seen played by Georgia the whole season, and it was just ugly from top to bottom. You got to just can this one and look forward to next season at this point.
And looking forward to next season is going to be year 5 for Mike White. James, do you think the Mike White experiment in Athens is on its last legs rolling into 26, 27?
I mean, I think so. I think so. I mean, just considering where Georgia basketball has been kind of historically, it's definitely an improvement to where they would have been not really making the tournament. But, when you keep getting these first round exits like that, at some point you got to, accept that you want to be better than that, especially when you look around at what the rest of the SEC is doing. Tennessee is taking a large step. We know how good Florida has been. Nate Oates and Alabama are really coming on strong. Auburn before this year was really good. So really just compared to where the rest of the SEC has been, I think at some point you do got to pull the plug on the experiment and look to just get better.
Yeah, and you brought that up, the SEC just overall depth. Like every one of these teams has been, like Vanderbilt was great this year. Tennessee back in the...
I didn't even mention Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky. I mean, and Kentucky was considered bad this year, and then look at them.
And they were good.
Obviously, they were on like an 11-game losing streak at one point during the year, and they still were in the semifinals of the tournament, and they had Arkansas in overtime. This is a very deep conference, and Georgia, they were ranked at one point. They have the talent. Obviously they're getting into the tournament, which is a huge step up from not even making it. But you got to see that consistency flow. And you just need to be able to get to that second round, because when you got everyone around you, especially your rivals who are having success, it gets people start to talking, and you hear that murmuring, and you just got to figure out what can this program do to keep moving it on. But, hey, we're going to stick with the March conversation. Georgia women back in the tournament this year. They get bounced real quick by UVA in an overtime game where I think they went UVA went an 11-2 run in overtime, and Georgia just had no answer. Joe, this team, another bounce, and I think you mentioned it earlier, the first highest seed to get the upset in the women's tournament.
Great bounce.
Yeah, this was a stat I was kind of keeping track of as we were going along on the beginning of round one in the women's tournament. Georgia, the first team to go down to a worse-rated seed against Virginia, and as you just said, Drew, 11-2 run in overtime. Just pretty much inexcusable for the Dogs, unfortunately. The way the game closed out in regulation, Mia Woolfolk missed a pair of clutch free throws with about 55 seconds left, I believe. And then she also had a chance to not tie it, but rather make a game-winning shot at the buzzer in regulation, missed that. So that is, the free throws are inexcusable. The buzzer beater attempt, that, you can call that what that is. But going into overtime and only being able to muster up 2 points in 5 minutes with your season on the line, that's just no worse way to watch your team go out. So that was pretty heartbreaking to see if you're a Lady Dogs fan. So my heart goes out to those fans out there. But Georgia women's a little bit better position right now, I think, than the men's team, because that was only the first time the Dogs have made the tournament in the last 10 years and failed to make it to the second round since 2016. So they've got some good success that they've been able to sustain here in the last several years.
Coach Abe finally getting the Dogs back to the dance. James, you think they can try to continue this success? The SEC, especially on the women's side, has been a lot more successful over recent years. They could definitely build off of this going into the future.
Absolutely. I mean, making the tournament, it's an accomplishment of itself. It does deserve to be celebrated. And at least, hey, they weren't down by 40 in the second half like the men's team were. It took them till overtime. So there are some positives here, but you definitely have a lot of momentum with the Lady Dogs here and the program they're building. I definitely think you can take this momentum and keep, moving forward, pushing forward. Like we mentioned, again, the SEC and women's basketball is so good with South Carolina, LSU. I mean, Alabama's making tournament runs now too. So I definitely think you can continue this momentum and keep up with the other programs. I think the Georgia's women's basketball is probably in a better spot, I would say, after the loss than the Georgia's men's team.
Yeah, it's all about building off, but March, it's a little bit of a struggle bus for Dogs fans, but we're going to keep the basketball train rolling because Georgia Tech has announced that Scott Cross, new head coach of the Georgia Tech men's program. I mean, he's been doing some things over at Troy the past couple of years that, we've gotten to see, keep your eye on in the state of Alabama, taking them to back-to-back tournament appearances. Didn't get past that first round, but he's had some very talented teams. Their motto, take the stairs, which I love, is very gritty. James, you like the hire for Tech?
I do. Like I said, being from Bama, seeing Troy and what they've been able to do, make the tournament. And so, obviously they didn't get past that first round, like you said, but what he's been able to do with Troy, Sunbelt resources, moving up now to the next step, next phase, moving up to the ACC and Georgia Tech. I'm excited to see what he can do with those resources. And, the ACC isn't as strong of a basketball conference as the Big 12 or SEC. So I would maybe watch out for Georgia Tech, maybe go on a run here a little bit.
Joe, Georgia Tech, successful in football this past year, successful obviously in baseball. Really wanted to see that basketball program elevate. You think Scott Cross was the right hire for the team?
I do think he's a good hire, and I think this is one of the most overshadowed parts of March. During the March Madness, we're all so glued to the games that nobody really looks at the fact that these mid-major coaches are getting hired to these Power 4 programs. We just saw it with Sienna's head coach taking Duke down to the wire in round one, then getting hired by Syracuse. Scott Cross going from Sunbelt champions this year with Troy into the tournament, and now getting his flowers up at Georgia Tech. So I think Scott Cross is going to have tremendous success with the Jackets program, at least for the next couple of years, that he gets his feet on the ground with them. And as you said, I think Georgia Tech could be a serious threat in a kind of struggling ACC over the last couple of years. There hasn't been too many contenders in there as we've seen in the last, decades that we were growing up. So we shall see what that holds for him. But I do think Scott Cross was a very good hire out of Troy.
Tech's got a lot of, they've had talent over many years, and we know this program can take that next step. Scott Cross is going to be the guy. Only time will tell with that. But hey, still more to come. We're going to keep the basketball train rolling. The red-hot Atlanta Hawks, and we'll maybe squeeze in some time with the NFL draft just a month away. More to come on The Pit. All right, another episode of The Pit rounding down, and of course we got to finish it with the Atlanta Hawks. They are red hot right now. What 12-1 in their last 13 games. That win streak came to a close, but still, this team a projected 6th seed right now. James, these Hawks, would you believe that where they, after those moves they made at the deadline, that they'd be a 6th seed right now going in?
Absolutely not. I was, in fact, worried that the Hawks weren't even going to make that play-in tournament. I thought they were going full tank mode the way, they had Kristaps Porzingis and they had Trae Young, and then they made all these moves, tore the team down, brought in guys like C.J. McCollum and added guys like Jonathan Kuminga right now who's balling out. I think the Hawks have absolutely just exceeded expectations. You got to give a lot of credit to head coach Quinn Snyder. He has got the boys playing. You mentioned 12-1 in their last 13. They're 15-5 in their last 20, and the way Jalen Johnson has kind of taken over this team, the Hawks are humming right now.
We're going to get, hopefully, playoff basketball in the A. Joe, I mean, this team, you look at it right now, 39-32. They're a 6th seed, not even going to be in the play-in if the season would end today. They play Memphis tonight to try to keep it going. Do the Hawks finish the year with whatever amount of games, 10 to 15 games left on the year, that they're humming into the playoffs?
I will say yes, only based on this last 13-game stretch. Going 12-1 is exactly what you need to do at this point in the season if you are in that play-in bubble range from 7 to 10. So I will say the Hawks will finish 6 or better as we get into the end of the regular season here very soon. But this is just quite remarkable because we've known in the sports world that the Atlanta Hawks are part of the play-in invitational almost every year, and it's a combination of either them, the Bulls, the Heat, or the Magic. So it's pretty incredible to see them not in that cusp at this moment, but we'll see if they can hang on to it the rest of the year.
Yeah, with so many remaining games left, you really need to get these wins and try to keep the streak rolling because, there's a very thin line between being in that 7 spot in the play-in to the 6 right now, especially with Orlando. And of course, people are going to say what they want about the Hawks not having played the best teams over this past 13-game stretch. But I don't care who you're playing. Still playing and winning 13 games in a professional league is impressive, to say none the least. But Quinn Snyder's got this team buzzing. All right, quick, rapid fire. A month away from the draft. Falcons, Georgia, a lot of dogs going to be on the board. Falcons do not have a first-round pick. Joe, quick, second-round pick. What do the Falcons got to do?
I don't know. I don't know. There's so many needs for this team right now. I definitely think they need wide receiver depth. I think they could even take a flyer on a quarterback, as funny as that is to say with both Tua and Michael Penix Jr. now in the quarterback room. But you got to find somebody who maybe doesn't have a laundry list of previous injuries. And then you could also address the linebacker issue because we have gotten rid of Caden Ellis. We shipped him off back to New Orleans where we got him from. And we got really nobody over the middle ready to blow up the A-gap. So Divine Diablo's there, but who knows if he'll be healthy off of that injury he sustained last season.
Joe, you said wide receivers. I like it. There's a Georgia Bulldog who might be available in the second round named Zachariah.
Yeah, Zachariah Branch would be a great pickup.
He'd be electric. I mean, they saw finally Jalen Walker stepping in. Hey, like these dogs, they're actually pretty good for their team, James.
We should probably draft them.
Who should be looking out for the dogs for the draft?
Oh, man, when you're talking about dogs, I mean, you can't not mention C.J. Allen. You mentioned linebacker. He is one of the most explosive prospects in this draft. The way he just flies all over the field, the instincts are there. I'm excited to see where C.J. Allen can go, what kind of defense he can go in there. If you can scheme up right, you might have an all-pro linebacker right there in C.J. Allen.
Yeah, there's some big names that these Georgia Bulldogs may be hearing their names called in day one or definitely early on in day two. But, hey, that's going to do it for another episode of The Pit. Wrapped up here. Thanks for joining us, of course, for Georgia's Regional Sports Show. Join us next week.